Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Dun, dun, these apes have been plotting their escape. Dun, 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 dun. This is a reboot that might be better than the original 1968 film starring Charlton Heston. Good evening, cadets. This is Lance from Cinematic Galaxy here to finally bring you my review of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which was released in 2011, directed by Rupert Wyatt. I might have reviewed this film years ago, back when it came out, because I started this channel back in 2011. But whether I did or not, I definitely think it's time for me to review it again at this point. War for the Planet of the Apes came out last weekend. I've seen it as of making this review, but I'm going to do my best to review this film as though I haven't seen War, although that's kind of hard because I have seen War. So bear with me here. But I do think Rise is very much a standalone movie. I think it very much works as a standalone film. And I have the Blu-ray right here. I bought this Blu-ray back when it came out without having seen it in theaters. It was a blind purchase, which I don't do much of because it's risky, but this was one that I just heard a lot of great things about from people I trusted, and I actually thought it looked good too from the trailers. It is a reboot, and you know how people are always complaining about reboots are lazy and they're never as good as the original and all that stuff. Well, to delve into Rise, brief synopsis. I'm sure most of you have seen it, but basically you have this super intelligent young ape chimpanzee named Caesar. You see him grow up with his human owners, and you see him kind of go on a journey of self-discovery, and it's really a coming-of-age story, essentially. But honestly, it becomes so much more. And honestly, I mean, just to get right into it, I love this movie. I adore this film. I loved it back then. I love it now. I love it as a standalone film. I love it even more as the first part of a trilogy now that we have all three parts of it. Um, and I definitely think it's possible. I mean, this is a reboot that is not connected to the old series. It's certainly possible to look at this as its own thing. At the same time, if you are a fan of the old Apes films, now I probably saw the Tim Burton one, which I've heard is horrible, way back when it came out. I don't remember anything about it. And out of the original films, I've only seen in its entirety the original 1968 film. So really, that being said, even though that's the only one I've seen, in this movie you can spot a lot of really cool callbacks and references to that original film that are very subtle. They're very well worked into this movie, and they feel fresh. And this movie, Rise, honestly, those moments feel iconic to Rise. It does not feel like it's riffing off of the old movie at all, and I think that's great. I think the most brilliant thing that this new Apes series did, that starting with Rise, is making the apes the main characters, making Caesar the main character, um, rather than a human. And you really find yourself rooting for the apes in this movie, which that leads me into one of the big positives of the film. It's the cast. You've got James Franco, who in a lot of ways is an unusual choice to play Will. He's not who I would have thought of, to be honest. I would have almost seen someone more like Tobey Maguire playing this part, but I honestly think James Franco does a brilliant job and is really likable as well. You really kind of sympathize with him in his quest. He's a scientist. His father, John Lithgow, has Alzheimer's. Lithgow's great in the film. You've got, you've got David Oyelowo before he was recognizable as Martin Luther King Jr. in a very despicable role. You've got Brian Cox and Tom Felton doing what they do best, playing just absolutely horrible characters, like not characters story-wise, but just horrible people. Like Tom Felton in this movie, I don't think I've ever disliked his character more than I have here. He makes Draco Malfoy look like Santa Claus. So yeah, I really despised him, and And of course, I have to talk about Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis is the motion capture king. He's played Gollum in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, King Kong in Peter Jackson's 2005 film, and most recently Supreme Leader Snoke in the current Star Wars trilogy. But I feel like Caesar, especially with the trilogy being concluded, but I even felt that way just with this movie. I think Caesar is his best work. I think Caesar is the most complete character he's ever played, and he's had the most opportunity to show what he's capable of with Caesar. As great as Gollum is, I really do think Caesar is the most impressive, his most impressive achievement as a motion capture actor. And obviously, the technology around Caesar continually gets better with each film. But even in Rise, it's great, and I say that for Rise and all the ape actors who were fantastic. But Caesar is the one you connect with the most, and you get to know him the most, and he's just brilliant. Um, and yeah, just the characters, the cast, the characters in this movie are awesome. You really get to know each of them. I really love the gorilla Buck. My favorite character, aside from Caesar, though, is the orangutan Maurice, and that does not change as we get to the other films in the series. So yeah, characters are positive, cast positive. Story is another thing that's great. A lot of you probably already seen this movie by now. I don't need to go over the story, but it's just so skillfully woven together. It feels standalone. It feels perfectly self-contained, but it also sets up very well for what's to come. Another thing, again, the VFX. Yes, they've come a long way, but they still look incredible in this movie, and they were game-changing and pushing the bar way back in 2011. Also, we've got there's some really brilliant action set pieces in this movie, more so than I remembered, particularly the climax. It's really well done, um, and yeah, and then I also have to compliment Patrick Doyle's score. I'm a fan of Patrick Doyle. I think he's a somewhat underrated film composer. His score here is very whimsical, very adventurous, fun, and it feels very much like a family movie. Although it is serious when it needs to be, it's action packed when it needs to be. Um, so that score is a positive. All in all, I can rave on and on and on about this film, but it's a great film on its own. It's a great film as the first part in the trilogy, and I'm really not able to think of any negatives with this movie that are strong. I wouldn't give it a perfect rating, but I still can't think of any strong negatives. I give Rise of the Planet of the Apes a solid 9.5 out of 10. Anyway, guys, let me know what your thoughts on this movie are. If you've seen it, hopefully you have by now. And anyway, stay tuned for my reviews of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and Rise of the Planet and War for the Planet of the Apes. Thanks as always for watching, and this is Lance from Cinematic Galaxy signing off.